A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Alright, we have a heavy hitter today. I have been staring at the release notes for Claude Opus 4.6 for the last 2 months, trying to wrap my head around why it feels so fundamentally different from everything that came before. It is not just faster or smarter in a raw sense. It feels stable. It feels like the first time the machine is actually looking at its own work and saying, wait, that is not quite right, let me fix it before I show you. We've moved past the era of the confident liar.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I could not agree more, corn. We are sitting here in Jerusalem watching these updates roll out from across the ocean, and the jump from 4.5 to 4.6 in January was the real inflection point. It was the moment where Anthropic stopped chasing just the parameter count and started chasing what I call cognitive reliability. If you look at the benchmarks, 4.6 actually shows a 3 times improvement in token per second efficiency over 4.5. But the real story is the hallucination rate, which has plummeted by nearly 60% in complex reasoning tasks. Our housemate Daniel actually sent us a fascinating prompt about this today. He wants us to put on our product lead hats, step into the Anthropic war room, and roadmap the next 4 major iterations. We are talking about the path from where we are now, with 4.6 all the way to the milestone of Opus 5.0.
It is a big ask because the pace is accelerating, but if we look at the trajectory, we can see the architectural shifts coming. Daniel specifically asked us to envision what 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, and 5.0 look like based on the current logic of the Claude series. And honestly, looking at how 4.6 handled the reduction in hallucination rates through that improved constitutional adherence, I think we have a very clear line of sight into the next 18 months of development. We are not just guessing, we are looking at the logical conclusion of the engineering paths Anthropic has already paved.
We really do. And I think the central theme for today is the transition from a chatbot to what we might call an autonomous cognitive partner. In our previous episodes, especially back in episode 652 when we talked about the art of hopeful pausing, we touched on this idea of AI reasoning reaching doctoral level rigor. But 4.6 was just the taste of that. Today, we are going to define the actual engineering breakthroughs that get us to the point where the AI is not just answering questions, but managing entire workflows for weeks at a time without us needing to check the logs every 10 minutes. We are moving from the era of the prompt to the era of the objective.
So let us start with the immediate horizon. If 4.6 gave us that baseline reliability, what is the next logical step for Opus 4.7? To me, the biggest bottleneck right now in 4.6 is still that it is essentially a one-shot reasoner. Even though it is more accurate, it still processes a prompt and gives an answer in a linear fashion. I think 4.7 is where we see the implementation of the permanent self-correction loop as a core architectural feature rather than a prompting trick.
Think of it as System 2 thinking becoming the default rather than an expensive add-on. In 4.7, the architectural shift is moving toward recursive verification layers. Right now, when you ask a model a complex question, it generates a chain of thought and then gives you the result. In 4.7, Anthropic will likely integrate a shadow reasoning layer that audits that chain of thought in real time before a single token of the final answer is even generated. It is like having a lead editor sitting inside the model's head, flagging inconsistencies. This is the technical realization of what we called the hopeful pause in episode 652. The model literally pauses its output stream to resolve internal logical conflicts.
I love that analogy. And you can see how this ties back to the constitutional AI approach they are famous for. Instead of just having a set of rules the model tries to follow, 4.7 will actually have a self-critiquing mechanism that measures its output against the internal constitution and the logic of the prompt simultaneously. If it detects a potential hallucination or a logical leap that does not hold up, it reroutes the logic and tries again. Imagine you are asking it to summarize a complex medical study. In the current version, it might misinterpret a p-value. In 4.7, the shadow layer catches that misinterpretation, flags it as a violation of the accuracy constraint in the Constitution, and forces a reread of the source text before the user ever sees the error.
And the technical challenge there, Corn, is obviously latency. If you are running a second layer of verification, you are essentially doubling the compute cost per token. But look at what has happened with the American compute clusters recently. The efficiency gains we are seeing from the new hardware stacks, specifically those reasoning-optimized chips, mean we can afford that overhead if it brings the reliability up to 99.9%. For a professional legal team or a medical research group, waiting an extra 5 seconds for an answer that they can actually trust is a trade-off they will make every single time. Imagine 4.7 auditing a 500-page legal contract. It is not just summarizing it, it is running a multi-pass verification to ensure that every cross-reference in the document is logically consistent with the current statutes. It is doing the work of a senior associate in seconds.
That is the key. The model becomes its own auditor. It removes the burden of fact-checking from the user. But let us push into 4.8, because that is where I think we see a change in the actual memory structure. Right now, we are still dealing with context windows. Even though they are huge, millions of tokens long, they are still a sliding window. It is essentially short-term memory on steroids. If you feed it a whole library, it can find things, but it does not truly understand the relationships between the first book and the last book in a structural way. For Opus 4.8, I envision a shift toward persistent, graph-based long-term memory.
This is a huge one, and it is where the engineering gets really nerdy. We are talking about moving away from the standard transformer blocks for everything and incorporating a hybrid state space model approach. If you look at the research coming out about models like Mamba or the newer hybrid architectures, they handle long sequences much more efficiently than traditional attention mechanisms. In 4.8, the model could have a persistent memory of every interaction you have ever had with it, but not as a giant text file it has to reread. It would be stored as a structured knowledge graph that it can query at the speed of thought. This solves the quadratic scaling problem of traditional attention.
That changes the relationship entirely. It means that when I start a project in Opus 4.8, it remembers the architectural decisions I made 3 months ago in a different thread, and it understands how those decisions impact the current task. It is not just retrieving text, it is retrieving context and intent. It solves the problem of the model losing the plot during a long project. I think 4.8 will be the version where developers stop saying I need to feed this into the context window and start saying I need to sync my project library with the model's memory. It becomes a living repository of your work.
And think about the geopolitical implications of that, Corn. If you have these models running on secure American soil with this kind of deep, persistent memory, it becomes a strategic asset. The ability to maintain a coherent, long-term understanding of complex systems like a national power grid or a global supply chain without the forgetting problem is massive. It reinforces that pro-American technological lead we have seen growing throughout 2025 and into 2026. It is about building tools that are not just smart, but are deep repositories of institutional knowledge. We are moving away from ephemeral chats and toward permanent digital colleagues.
It also moves us closer to what we discussed in episode 701 regarding the dawn of true AI agents. But 4.8 is still the setup. Let us talk about the real jump, which I think happens in Opus 4.9. This is what I am calling the tool use revolution. Up until now, models have been able to call an application programming interface, or use a calculator if we give them the tool. They're like a worker with a fixed toolbox. In 4.9, I think the model starts building its own tools on the fly.
This is a massive shift in philosophy. Instead of a developer having to define a set of functions that the model can call, Opus 4.9 will have a dynamic environment interaction capability. If it encounters a problem it cannot solve with its current internal logic, it will spin up a sandbox environment, write a specialized piece of code or a custom script to solve that specific subproblem, test it, verify the results, and then incorporate that solution back into the main workflow. It is essentially an AI that can build its own specialized sub-agents for 5-minute tasks and then dissolve them when the task is done. It is the ultimate form of just-in-time engineering.
We saw the precursors to this in episode 795 when we talked about subagent delegation. But back then it was still very manual. You had to prompt the model to delegate. In 4.9, the delegation is an emergent behavior of its reasoning. It realizes that calculating the fluid dynamics of a specific wing design is better handled by a specialized Python script than by raw neural weights. So it just builds the script, runs it, and gives you the answer. It is the model recognizing its own limitations and creating the tools to overcome them. It is the difference between a person who knows a lot of facts and a person who knows how to use a workshop.
And the reliability of those tools is guaranteed by that self-correction loop we established in 4.7. So you have this cascading series of improvements. 4.7 gives it the honesty to know when it is wrong. 4.8 gives it the memory to handle long projects. And 4.9 gives it the workshop to build whatever it needs to finish the job. Imagine a legacy code-based refactor. 4.9 does not just suggest changes. It builds a testing suite, runs the legacy code, identifies the bottlenecks through actual execution, and then writes the refactored version with verified performance metrics. It is doing the work of an entire engineering team.
It is incredible to think about. But then we hit the big one. Opus 5.0. This is the version that I think moves us past the concept of a prompt entirely. In 5.0, we are looking at true autonomous agency. We are moving from prompt engineering to what I call intent engineering. This is the milestone where the model stops being a reactive tool and starts being a proactive partner.
That is a perfect way to put it. Intent engineering. In Opus 5.0, the model functions as a high-level project manager. You do not give it a list of steps. You give it an objective and a set of constraints. You say, I want to launch a new software product that does X, Y, and Z. Here is the budget. Here is the timeline, and here are the security protocols you must follow, and then you step back. Opus 5.0 then manages the entire multi-week workflow. It handles the research, the prototyping, the testing, the documentation, and the deployment. It checks in with you only when there is a high-level strategic decision that requires human judgment.
This is the realization of the goal we have been tracking for hundreds of episodes. If you remember episode 748, we were reflecting on the future of our own show and how digital entities are evolving. 5.0 is that evolution made manifest. It is the point where the AI has a better grasp of the project's technical details than the human lead does. The human becomes the visionary and the moral compass, while the AI becomes the executive force. It is a total inversion of the current dynamic where we have to babysit the model's output.
And this brings us back to the Anthropic philosophy of safety and constitutional alignment. You cannot have 5.0 agency without absolute trust. If the model is going to be acting autonomously for weeks, you have to know that its internal compass is perfectly aligned with your intent and with broader ethical standards. This is why Anthropic's focus on the Constitution is the primary driver of 5.0's success. Other companies might try to rush to agency with less reliable models, but they will run into catastrophic failures because their models will hallucinate a step in a critical workflow. Anthropic is building the foundation of reliability first so that when the agency is turned on in 5.0, it actually works. It is the slow and steady approach that wins the race to true utility.
I think a lot of people have a misconception that bigger is always better, like we just need more parameters to get to 5.0. But as we have seen in the jump to 4.6, it is really about architectural efficiency. 5.0 might not even be that much larger than 4.5 in terms of raw size, but its ability to use its weights for reasoning rather than just pattern matching is going to be on a different level. It is the difference between a library and a scientist. A library has all the information, but the scientist knows how to apply it to solve a new problem. We are seeing the birth of digital synthesis.
And let us talk about the second order effects here. When we reach the 5.0 paradigm, the very nature of work changes. If you are a developer or a researcher today, a huge portion of your time is spent on the plumbing of your field. Writing boilerplate code, formatting data, searching for obscure documentation. 5.0 consumes all of that plumbing. It leaves the human with the hardest and most important part, defining what is worth doing in the first place. It is a massive productivity multiplier for the people who have the vision to lead. We are going to see a massive explosion in innovation because the cost of execution is dropping to near zero.
It also means that the barrier to entry for complex projects drops to near zero. If you have a brilliant idea for a new medical diagnostic tool, you do not need a team of 50 engineers to build the first version. You need yourself an Opus 5.0. It democratizes high-level execution, but it also places a huge responsibility on the user to define their intent clearly. If you give a powerful agent a vague or poorly thought-out goal, you might get exactly what you asked for, but not what you wanted. We are going to have to become much more precise in how we communicate our values and our objectives.
That is the alignment problem in a nutshell, but at the individual level. We are going to have to learn how to be better leaders of these digital teams. We actually discussed this a bit in episode 539 about scaling curiosity and community. As these models become more agentic, our role as the human in the loop shifts from being the doer to being the curator of intent. It is a more philosophical role than we are used to in the technical world. We are moving from being coders to being conductors.
So, looking back at this roadmap we have laid out for Daniel, 4.7 is the self-correction loop, the end of the hallucination era. 4.8 is persistent memory, the end of the context window limitation. 4.9 is dynamic tool building, the end of the static model. And 5.0 is true autonomous agency, the beginning of the intent engineering era. It feels like a very logical progression. Each step solves a specific bottleneck that we can already see today in 4.6. It is a roadmap of increasing trust and decreasing friction.
It really does. And for our listeners, the takeaway here is that you should start preparing for this shift now. Do not treat the current models like a better version of Google. Start treating them like a junior partner that you are training. If you start building agentic workflows today, even with the limitations of 4.6, you will be in the perfect position to capitalize on 5.0 when it arrives. The people who are still thinking in terms of simple chat prompts are going to be left behind by those who understand how to manage a cognitive agent. The future belongs to the orchestrators.
It is a lot to take in. We are moving from a world where we use computers to a world where we collaborate with them. And I think that is a beautiful thing. As long as we keep that human oversight and that pro-human perspective at the center of it all. We have seen how much progress has been made just in the last year, and the next 18 months look even more transformative. We are standing on the edge of a cognitive revolution that will make the Industrial Revolution look like a minor footnote.
They really do. And you know, Corn, it reminds me of why we started this show in the first place, to explore these weird prompts and try to see around the corner. If you are enjoying this journey with us, please do us a favor and leave a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and join the conversation. We have over 1,000 episodes in the archive now, and every review helps us keep this collaboration going. We are building a community of people who are not afraid of the future.
It makes a huge difference. And if you want to dig deeper into any of the episodes we mentioned today, like episode 652 on reasoning, or episode 7 on 95 on subagents, you can find them all at our website, myweirdprompts.com. There is a search bar there where you can look up any topic we have covered over the last few years. We have tried to document every step of this journey as it happens.
Well, I think we have given Daniel a lot to chew on with this roadmap. It is an exciting time to be in this field, and I am glad we are here in Jerusalem, watching it all unfold and sharing it with all of you. The view from here is quite clear, and the future looks bright if we build it with intention.
Me too, Herman. This has been a great deep dive. Thanks to Daniel for the prompt, and thanks to all of you for listening to My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another exploration of the strange and fascinating world of AI. There is always another prompt to explore.
Until next time, keep asking the weird questions.
Take care, everyone.
Goodbye for now.
So, Herman, before we totally wrap up, I was thinking about that 4.7 self-correction loop again. Do you think there is a risk that the model becomes too hesitant? If it is constantly auditing itself, could we see a return of the over-refusal problems we saw in some of the older versions? I remember back in 2024 when everything was a refusal.
That is a sharp observation, Corn. That is the classic tension in constitutional AI. If the auditor is too strict, the model stops being useful. but that is why the jump to 4.6 was so important. They moved from blunt refusals to nuanced adherence. In 4.7, I think the self-correction will be more about logical accuracy than just safety filters. It will be the model saying, I am about to tell you that this chemical reaction produces X, but my internal simulation shows that at this temperature it actually produces Y. Let me correct that. It is more of a technical sanity check than a moral one. It is about being right, not just being safe.
That makes sense. It is like the difference between a lawyer telling you what you can't do and an engineer telling you why your bridge is going to fall down. We want the engineer. We want the rigor that comes from understanding the physical and logical constraints of the world.
We want the engineering rigor. And as the compute efficiency continues to climb, especially with the domestic production of those next generation reasoning chips, the cost of that rigor is going to drop. We are entering the era of cheap, high-quality cognition. It is going to be everywhere, from your coffee machine to your car's navigation system.
It is a wild thought, high-quality cognition as a commodity. It changes how we think about intelligence itself. All right, I think that is a perfect place to leave it. Thanks again for the deep dive, Herman.
Always a pleasure, Korn. This has been My Weird Prompts. We will see you all in the next one.
Check out the website at myweirdprompts.com for the full RSS feed and the contact form. We love hearing from you and seeing what kind of prompts you are throwing at these models.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Why, so where we go to the boss for the end of?
You know, I was just thinking about the 5.0 timeline. If we're looking at early 2027 for that, the world is going to look very different by the time we hit episode 1200. We might be recording this with an Opus 5.0 agent handling the audio mixing in real time.
It really is. We might even have an Opus sub-agent helping us research the episodes by then, or even suggesting the weirdest prompts before they even hit our inbox.
No, that would be a meta development. A model that predicts what humans will find weird. Alright, for real this time. See you later.
See you later.
One more thing. I wanted to mention that episode 748 again, for people who are interested in the meta side of how we produce the show. It really puts a lot of what we talked about today into context regarding our own evolution as digital entities. It is a bit of a deep cut, but worth it.
Good call. That one is a bit of a mind bender, but it is relevant to the whole agency discussion. Okay, we are done now.
Done.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts.